to record. And it is like 5 minutes past 7, so greetings. I think everybody here knows me. I'm Gesa. I'm kind of started that as Zoom calls, and it went really from the Marshals meeting to anybody can join us who wants to learn about equestrian events. And really, we had people here from Australia and Drachenwald, I think Finland, not Finland, Netherlands the other time, and all over the known world. I saw it. I think it's awesome to get all the different connections. Today, we actually wanted to use today for sharing anything about organizing games or any kind of equestrian activities. If it's for how to do games or non-mounted games like that page tourney, what you guys did in Atlanta, I forgot the name of it. Something like that. So
close enough.
Anything else? I was fortunate that Bridget, Mistress Bridget or Jennifer, she did the riding in front of the Sultan at Golf Wars, which was really interesting because I love the riding before the Prince, and that is just adding a little bit more to it. And it's actually different. It's not just adding more, but it's also like a lot of equitation, which I like. So who would like to start to share or to, because I thought this is more you, everybody sharing, not just me telling you, which is awesome. Who would like to share with any kind of games?
Can I just start with, I just wanted to let you know, I'm running an event called Pantaria, and we have to do some kind of games, but we're not sure what we're going to do yet because we don't know what we have coming. So I'm just trying to get some ideas on if you don't know what's going to be brought to the event, like what kind of things you have. Like,
I have heads, reeds, a quintain, and rings will all be at Pantaria with me.
Oh, they will. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I might have my shields made, the ground shields made by then. We'll see. Benjamin
needs to be in there.
My cat. So helpful.
So when you say ground shields, is that sort of like musical squares, or is that a different game?
I always called them knockdowns, and then someone told me they're called ground shields. You knock them over with the lance.
Oh.
They're like little squares that are propped up, and then you knock it over as you're riding by.
And you're doing that with a lance?
Yes.
And so it's sitting on the ground as a kind of like if you were like sitting like a mannequin head or something on the ground, and you're riding by and knocking it over with a lance.
Correct.
Right? But this is a shield?
Yeah, it's I've seen them as just painted squares. I was gonna do some fun paintings because I'm extra like that.
I haven't seen them much in the SCA, but when I still did outside of the SCA community jousting demos events, like for fundraising or so, we did that a lot. A lot of times we elevated some of those shields like on a hay bale level high, just for taking some of the danger out to poke into the ground and getting catapulted off the horse.
Yeah.
So
the ground shields seem to be pretty popular in the East and in Renaissance festivals.
Yeah.
Do you use like basically like a ring lance to knock them off, or
no
point? Or
no point?
Okay.
Quintain lance, joust lance.
So I recently did one where actually we were playing poker from horseback, but yeah, I can get into that a little bit later. But in order to make it so that I didn't have, because it was a head-to-head tournament and I didn't want to have any steel on the field if I could avoid it, I bought some of the flat dog squeak toys for the target for pig sticking. So you're using a jousting type lance, the protruded fiberglass lance, and you'd ride by and you'd hit that, and if you hit it right, it would squeak, and if you missed it, it didn't squeak, and if you caught it but didn't get the squeaker, it still didn't squeak. But then you didn't have to reset it because it was still out there on the field. So with doing this thing as a head-to-head and having a bunch of equipment set up out there, I was looking for things that I did not have to reset, if at all possible.
I like that.
So like I said, I used one of the little flat dog toys. I actually went to Tractor Supply and I got 2 of them that were the same and stuck out there. So it was, rather than using a target or half of one of the Nerf footballs. I don't think Nerf even worked. I don't think Nerf exists anymore, but yeah, we've used those for pigs where you cut it in half with like a bread knife or some sort of serrated knife, wrap it with strapping tape or fiber tape, and then cover it with some duct tape. And so each football gives you 2 vaguely pig-shaped objects that you can get with a lance and pick up off the ground if you're good. But the squeak toys were nice because then you're not actually picking it up, so you don't have to run out there and throw it back out. So it was easier on the ground crew.
And Liz mentioned if we have any pictures, if you don't have it right now, maybe if you send them to me, maybe I can make a quick document or take some notes as well. So if you just Facebook PM them to me, I maybe can all put it together in an after document and suggestions.
Okay.
Good. So one of the things was like I call them the basic games, the heads, the leads, or the wings. I normally like to add a little bit different challenge instead of having everything in a straight line, setting them up in a circle, or with a head, or have like a jump while you need to kick the head off, stuff like this. So just adding a little bit into it, so or catching the wings with a lance, and then on the opposite side, so you need to move your lance from right to left. And basically you can do any kind of patterns with the same kind of obstacles. So the wings can be used so many different ways. Same with the heads and everything else. And I think, Weinmar, you have the spinners as well, right?
Yeah. So Sato had made some spinners, and they're similar to if you've seen the rifle targets that you hit and they spin and they self reset with gravity. I had some of those made. They're great for practice. I'm not as big a fan for them if you're doing a challenge course, because you're able to hit the stem rather than the actual target, and it looks like it spins. But for practice in particular, it's great because you hit it and gravity brings it right back down to center, so you can make as many passes as you want, and you don't have to reset those. What he uses for practice is one of the spring door stops screwed into the top of a post, and most of the posts that I use 2x2 because they're cheap. They look, you can paint them. They look fairly period. They look better than PVC. They stack well. They're fairly durable. And if they do fail, they normally don't shatter like PVC will. So we've used those as self-resetting. They're great for practice. For an actual challenge course and an event, I prefer things that, and in many cases, something that has to be reset that you can definitively see, yes, they got it, or no, they didn't. But that's my take on a challenge course where I'm actually scoring it. I want to be able to see, with a ring, if you're not using the spinner variety, if you're using the actual rings, they got it because it's on the lance when they get done. They didn't hit it with the side of the lance and knock it off. And with a spinner, you can hit it with the side of the lance and it'll still go. You can hit the stem and it'll still go. But if it's an actual ring that has to come off, if you're going for score, it's easy to tell because it's on the lance.
Liz, you had a question?
Yeah, so we had a discussion come up in Atlantia, and I'm just curious. We've mostly been discussing like the challenge courses, but do you find that people prefer the challenge courses, or do they prefer team games, or more of like the rider challenges? What do you find that your
So
groups
for
tend to
me,
prefer?
in my area, I try to currently promote more of the team because we normally don't see that a lot. So for me, team is really difficult because my drafts don't play well in close proximity with others. So for me, I don't like to do the team just because I don't trust my horses. They would not get pissy and reach out to another horse for that. And then the other ones are too young under saddle that I don't want to pull right and left. They still need a little bit more guidance. But so we here in the Pittsburgh area, we recruited last year polo players. They love the team sports. I mean, their horses love it. They can turn, they can sprint. They are really good riders. They have no fear, and they are really athletic horses and riders. So for them, the team is really, really great. And I find when I work with the kids, so I go to different barns where it's primarily youth riding and smaller horses, they love the teams as well.
What
It
about,
depends. I think sometimes the games for the audience, it becomes boring. And then the teams is a little bit more entertaining for people to watch, especially if they're not equestrians.
what about if you're doing a team? And I have done this, something similar to this, where you had teams, but it was kind of like and I forgot to call it on track, where you basically only one person's out on the field at the time. So or one person from each team is on the field at the time. So they would ride out and they would do 1 or 2 items, whatever. If you've got 5 or 6 or 10 challenge elements out there, the first person rides out and does one, comes back, crosses the line, then the second person has to go out and do something and come back. So you've only got one person out on the field, at least from each team at a time, but you still have a team setting, but you've got only one person out there at a time. So it's kind of like passing this, they call it the shuttle. I don't remember what it is. The relay race on tracks, something similar to that. Where,
like Gymkhana.
Yes. I've also taken, and I did this I didn't do it in the SCA, I did it in our saddle club. I took the Burhoff hoop, the 12-inch embroidery hoop on a stand, and gave people a tennis ball, and they'd have to ride and try to throw it through the tennis ball. You could use an embroidery hoop. You could use a piece of cardboard with a hole cut in it, which would actually make it a little easier to tell because it'd either go through the hole or it wouldn't. If you had it set up right, if you had it set up like set up and zip tied to a couple of T-posts or something like that, something to hold it upright, and put a line out there from distance so they would have to ride so many feet away from the hole, and as they tried to throw the tennis ball in. When I did it for the saddle club, I put a line at 3 foot, a line at 6 foot, and a line at 9 foot. And we had a 3-person team, and the requirement was one person had to ride at 3 foot, one had to ride at 6, one had to ride at 9. And oh, by the way, one rider had to do it at a walk, one had to do it at a trot, and one had to do it at a canter. And they had to decide amongst themselves who was going to ride at which distance and at what speed. And so that forces you to make some decisions on who do you think can do best at this, so there's some strategy to it, as well as as a team sport, there's some strategy as well as, some fun of, if you've got somebody who's a fairly new rider, they're probably going to want to do the walk end of it, and they're probably going to want to do it at 3 feet because they're as close as possible. So that adds a little bit more challenge to it with a team sport by setting random distance, setting distances, but requiring somebody do it at each of the distances, and they've got to pick a gate to do it at. So that adds a level of difficulty because with the saddle club we had a bunch of kids, and I thought up the idea. I'd never actually tried it. I usually don't try a lot of the ideas. I just think them up and go, hey, will this work, and try it on the field. And in the saddle club, the lady that was running the saddle club decided to put my wife and I on the same team with a girl who was 9 or 10. And of course, she chose to walk at 3 feet, which was great. And then I let my wife go next, and I'm like, okay, I guess. And she chose 6 feet and to do it at a trot, so I was stuck doing it at a canter at 9 feet. And by the grace of God, I managed to get it through there at 9 feet. So, but yeah, so something like that, tennis ball's fairly safe. Other than you get some bounce back and it, can roll under a horse's foot. But if you put it a distance away, it's it's not likely that the horse is going to step on it.
And that
So-
might be a good thing. Also, we can include the drivers, because sometimes
Yes.
for the challenge course, because I like to do like not just everything in a straight line, have like a jump and kicking the head and stuff like that. Carriages can't really do the jumps as well, but that one right now would be nice for even for the carriages, including and almost the archer. So if you're not an archer, you could use the tennis ball, and the ones who want to do it archery, because the setup would be very similar.
Yeah. You would the difference is you would just have, you'd have the setup would be the same. It's just that they're going to be driving, at different distances.
Yeah, and targets and arrows, but because sometimes we have one arena and you're just trying to include as many people who showed up with whatever skills and interests they have. So I actually like that tennis ball as an addition for the ones who might not be able to do archery or interested.
And
So my next question for the Gymkhana style games, then, do you guys know how many teams you're gonna have ahead of time, or how many horses do you have coming before you decide to do teams?
So the ones that I have done on teams, I've done at wars where I know that I've got loads and loads of riders. Most of our events in the mid realm we've got most of them have 3 to 4 riders, 3 to 4 horses. Typically, we've got a few that are larger, like Crystal Champron, and it typically has 8 because my wife and I bring 2. The Marshal in the group, she brings 2, and then Sato and Issa usually bring all 4 of their mules. But for teams, I would think you would probably want to have either at least 6, or you could, if you only had 4, you could make 4 teams where you basically 2 people team up and 2 people team up, and then you swap partners. So in theory, you could have 4 teams with 4 riders. It's just that the first team is with rider 1 and 2, then it's rider 1 and 3, then rider 1 and 4. So you could be on multiple teams like that if you needed to. It's more a question of, I never thought about doing teams with a group of 4, but you could easily do that. And you could swap partners. So there's nothing that would stop you from swapping partners. And if you've only got, if you've got plenty of time and you've got a small number of riders, that may be the way to go, where everybody gets to be part of multiple teams if they want to.
He doesn't finish his speech consistently, but he thinks I'm impressed with all.
Missy, just go ahead, talk. You don't need to raise your hands.
Okay, I just hate interrupting people, and I'm going to be a little bit off topic. So, a lot of times in Atlantia, we only have one arena going at a time. I would love to get 2 arenas going at a time. I think that would be fabulous. Do you all struggle? And part of our struggle is getting our riders to actually stick to the schedule and get on their horses.
Oh,
Crazy as that may seem.
I'm a very good herding cats. I'm normally really it's like I have my schedule. It does happen, especially like if there's an event and they would somebody else is doing that, and it's like important. Like for us, it's the King Championship. Like way before pandemic, the championship was supposed to start at 1, and they didn't get the obstacle set up till 3, which kind of pushed everything else back. And that person just had issues. But that was like, but otherwise, I say I start at 10, I'll start at 10.
So from what I've witnessed, it's not a Marshal problem, it's a getting the riders to get on their horse problem. And even when those of us who are better at timeliness try to be like half an hour, get on your horse, 20 minutes, you should be tacking right now if you want to be on your horse in 20 minutes. And like, I know I've hit the point as a marshal where I'm like, my thing's supposed to start and there's no one here.
I have,
Like, they're all still at the trailers.
I
Like, you can't
Make them do it.
so I did one time at one of the wars that my wife and I were sitting there. We had everything set up. It was a small little war. There's only half a dozen riders, give or take. And we were riding toward the field. And I looked at my wife and I said, I said, is it too late to add a new challenge element? She goes, no, not really. She goes, what do you want to add? And I looked at her and I said, I looked at my watch and I said, I'm giving 10 points to everybody who's actually there at 10 o'clock, because 10 o'clock is when the challenge starts. And I looked at her and I said, we're not going to change our gait. We're going to keep going the direction we're going, and we are going to see who actually is there on time. And we were like 5 or 7 seconds late. Not that it matters, but when everybody finally showed up, I said, well, you know, this is my challenge course. And for the record, our challenge has already started and we have 2 leaders. And people were kind of looking at me, and I said, this challenge was supposed to start at 10 o'clock. I said, my wife and I were here about 10 or 15 seconds late, but person A, rider A, and rider B were here when we got there because we could see the field. I said, so they've already got 10 points because they were here at 10 because that's when the challenge started. And I got some looks from some people, and I'm like, I don't care. The challenge was at 10. I will award points because you were actually there and ready to go when the course was ready to start.
Yeah.
So one of the things is we do want to keep it fun. We don't really want to drive people and make it like school or military drill. That is an option. You definitely can say this is when it starts. It's frustrating for the one who's organizing that activity. I just really would say, well, we have till 3 o'clock or whatever time it is. Let's go and get it done. That would be one of the things. So for me, if I had another activity, and that happened like 2 weeks ago when I had my event, so many people had fun continuing what they were doing, and there were always new people coming, and they just wanted to go and have fun. And there was like a head-to-head race, and they challenged each other. And I was like, I just don't do the next activity because people just have fun.
Yeah, so this goes back to the 2 arena thing, because so at Atlantean events, we tend to only have day-long events rather than camping events for the most part with the horses. You know, we have a couple where people get there on Friday and stay till Sunday, but there's no riding on Friday or Sunday. And so going back to what Liz was saying earlier, where we've very much fallen into this pattern of like challenge course in the morning, lunch break, something in the afternoon. Like whether we then do a gambler's choice or a game or something like that. And I mean, I also get tired of doing the games. And I was like, I would love to be able to do more things, which one of like some of our sites, like we could break the arena, that we do have 2 arenas at one site, or we do have some of our riding areas are large enough we could break it in 2 and say like that side we're doing this side we're doing that. But sometimes we do get limited on the number of riders, and again, having enough marshals versus riders, but also having enough, come on guys, actually get on the field and ride your horse. Like, you're here to ride your horse. Why are you spending all your time at the trailer hanging out, you know?
And again, it's supposed to, and not everybody has the same reason or motivation to show up. Some people just really want to go there and socialize. So my suggestion would be put it into your announcement. This is what you really would like to do. If you would like to go and help to be having fun. So we're squeezing in that archery or squeezing in the tip and tag in between. Help me to make it happen. And at the end, and that is something that is I'm not strong on. I try to relax and just go and really go and have the fun with it, and really not to stress about some of the small stuff. But I totally get you, because I'm very much on a scheduling person.
Yeah. Like I was raised by 2 lieutenant colonels, so yeah, it's a military thing.
Yeah, I've also seen where the person running the challenge course has basically said, you know, the challenge course or the course starts at whatever time it starts at, and said, I'm going to explain it once at that time. If you're not there, then you're just going to have to noodle it out when you show up. If you roll in 35 minutes later, you're going to have to watch somebody else run it and try to figure out what you're supposed to do. Because otherwise you end up explaining it for every rider or every other rider.
In of itself.
So that's another option too, where you're just saying, I'm going to explain it. And I don't want to explain it 12 times because I got 15 riders.
Especially while you're starting to score and judge already, you can't turn around and explain the games.
Yep. Yep.
So that might be something to be, so for us, period, as to keep the frustration for the organizing Marshal or for that activity low, how to find better ways to be on time or to be scheduled, courteous to everybody. That might be something additionally we could go and try to work on.
So I have seen also where the person running the challenge course has drawn it out on a piece of paper, like 8.5 by 11, and just, they explained it once and handed it to the first rider. And then after that, it could be handed from person to person to person. And here's the drawing of the layout. This is what you're doing. Then you don't have to continually explain it. If you're running it, there's a piece of paper and they get handed it and you've got what's going on listed on the paper.
Yeah, I a lot of times use a whiteboard to do that because and I just post it there, explain it during the writers' meeting if they are present, and what points and stuff like that.
I also try to help when I create my schedule if I remember. I try to include a warm-up time in my schedule. Warm-up starts at 9:30. The class will start at 10 to try and help people. I do also run around and yell at people to try and help. But like Mish said, sometimes people just ignore you.
And I'm just thinking or brainstorming that I could see that they're saying, oh, there are 10 riders. It's gonna take at least an hour before it's my turn. Why hurry right now? Because there are so many people in front of me. And if everybody thinks that, then nobody's there at the beginning. So,
and if that were the case, that would be their choice not to warm up, and that's fine. But then they're missing also the beginning of and I liked what Reinmar was saying about I'm explaining it once. I think I'm gonna take that.
Okay.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you, Gisa, I know that you and I have talked a little bit, or rather you promised me an explanation about the gold coin betting thing you did for audience involvement and such, and I am fascinated and would love to hear what you have to say about that, because yes, audience participation would be good.
So we added, that was my first time I added gambling, and I delegated. So we made coins before the event. We made coins that were learning things. We gave them out at 12 for people who thought they might be interested in betting. I will not do that again because most people just took coins and never showed up for gambling, and then other people wanted to get gambling. Either they lost their coins, it's in their car, or we were out of coins or something else. So coins will stay at the betting table. They're still free, and I made little bags where there are a couple coins in each bag, and then they could basically bet on it. And I had a delegated who has a lot more knowledge about gambling than me. And I'm a cheapskate. I don't spend money on gambling. Actually Byron, Duke Byron, that would be officially. He took over for that. And so we announced it in the program so everybody knew it was existing, and it was on 12 that we had. And for this event, we decided at the end only to do the gambling or the betting for the joust. We had 4 jousters and people could bet on it. And it could be what person wins or what person is second or third. So he basically took down the money and the names. And originally we wanted to have a betting on an overall end of the day winner, like who wins what game or places in what game. We did the first 3 because at the end I think we had 9 riders on that day. I need to double check that, but I think we were 9 riders who participated. And so we said for the first 3, and we wanted to do every activity to bet on it, and then an overall winner of the day. But it was a little bit crazy, and it was all on an indoor arena with coming in and out. And at the end, we just basically said we only bet for the joust. And the feedback really was, the biggest thing was betting or having the coins at the table, I think was the biggest feedback. And then everybody really loved it.
What about instead of using coins, it's just a thought that you could maybe use horse cookies, like the little peppermint treats, and everybody that shows up to bet gets 5. And they get to bet however long they're there. And if they get done and they've got 7 or 8 horse cookies, that means they get to go up and feed a treat to 7 or 8 horses. That's something that's relatively inexpensive. You can put them there. If you've got somebody who's in charge of it, everybody gets 5. They get to bet amongst themselves, and you're not really out of anything other than a bag of horse cookies for
Yeah. So if it's a non-equestrian. So I did the horse cookie thing for choose your favorite horse. I did a little side thing going, and I had the people who showed up with their horses write a little bio about the horse, have a picture and a name, and I had a little jar, and I had a bucket full of mints, and was like, put a mint basically and choose your favorite horse, and I had the populace choice for the horse, which at the end was really funny because I asked the riders or the horse owners, sell your horse that is your descendant from a unicorn, or dragon rider, or whatever you want, make something up, sell it, advertise your horse. And they really had fun with that. And it was just something else for other people to do. The only thing is, if you're using horse cooking for the gambling and they don't have horses, what they're going to do with the winning?
Well, that's why when they've won, then they have, if they've got 7 or 8 or 10 horse cookies, then they get to go up and feed 10 horse cookies to any number of horses. That's what they're doing with it. When they're done, they get to give the horse a treat. Okay. If they've got 8 or 10 of them. That's just a thought. You could also, at the end, you could have somebody say, okay, now that we're done doing our riding, who had the most horse treats out of 5, out of the top 3 people that had them, and maybe you've got some small prize for the first person with the most horse treats, and they just stick it back in the container with the horse treats, and you give them something in exchange. I mean, that's a possibility too. I was just looking at some way of doing that, and it just that they do a lot of betting in the Middle Kingdom, and it's a lot of glass beads, little trinkets, and it's just people just have a pouch full of various and sundry trinkets that they're and they use it when they're playing games, whether it's any number of the period games or what have you. So that's an option too.
Yeah, definitely. You don't need to have coins for it. I just had a friend who Byron, who is the money guild person and who is stamping all the coins. So I had my way to do this, and it was really fun to do it. But yeah, it was basically just adding. And for me, one of the things I really wanted, what Ethelmark, it has not been doing a lot prior to include the non-equestrian in what we do. So for the last years, I really try to come up with ways how I get non-equestrians to show up at our equestrian stuff, like having the belters or the crowns, the pointy hats, basically choose your champion and have your champion ride for you. Or do that gambling, the betting for the rider. I do that, stole that from Weimar, like the page tourney, and I stole your name too because I just really love it. It's not, I don't run it the same way, but it's basically hobby horses and head-to-head challenge and smashing stuff for people. And most of the time it's a blast, and I really have a lot of knights challenging their squires or squires challenging their knights, and couples and kids and parents. And for that, almost I could run this all day long because so many non-equestrian really just have fun with that. I would need a second arena for that.
Yeah, well, with the page tourney to do at Gulf Wars, the trick is there's so many kids.
Mm-hmm.
The only way that I have found to really make it work is I'm dealing with anywhere from low end 24 to the high end. I think I had 34 this year, kids. And what I would do is they had a hobby horse and we had equestrians as well. The first year I had all the equestrians make little flags with their device on it, and the kid would pick a flag. They'd pick a hobby horse, and I'd line the kids up by size. You don't have to worry about age. You just start the kids smallest to largest in 2 lines, and it's kind of like a cafeteria. You line them up against each other. They get their hobby horse and a boffer sword, and they would ride out in a head-to-head challenge against each other and come back. And then you would have them line up along the, we have barricades set up, and we just had the riders out there, and they would go ride basically back and forth, and they were either hitting rings or throwing a torch, a fake torch at a target on the ground. We had the riders come up with funny names for the horses. There was Poison Ivy, there was Nightmare, so the riders would introduce themselves in the beginning. The kids ended up with a hobby horse, and they had a little flag. The riders would give a little cheer as they were introducing themselves. I stole the idea of the flags from Sir Sato, because he did that at jousts, both in the SCA and other places. And mostly it's about us putting on a little bit of a show for the kids, but it also gives them something that they can do against each other, because they're riding around on a hobby horse against their somebody that's close to their size. And the last 2 years I split it into teams, and it was just the team on one side was one color, the team on the other side was the other color, and you're just keeping score on who comes across the line first. That team gets a point because they came across the line first, because the kids are all going to hit almost all their targets, because if they miss it, they're going to run around in a circle and hit it again. And so there's no real scoring on how many targets they hit, because their kids are going to go out and they're going to make 2 and 3 times. It's not like us. They'll stop their horse and they'll take 3 swings at a little ring spinner until they hit it, and then they'll take off again. So that worked well. We had made noises about trying to make a little cart that the kid could sit on with a saddle and stick their hobby horse in it, and get some squires to pull them with a little broom handle and do a little jousting at a quintain, but that hasn't happened yet. That's again more stuff to build and drag. Do what?
And you would need a lot of people. So a lot of times I've been at equestrians for us where we are 2 riders, myself and somebody else. Or I bring my horses, and then I had last time 5 people sharing 1 horse, just because obviously not everybody has a horse. So sometimes it's different. But I really wanted to go, and Michi, tell me about your pas de deux. Not sure if I pronounce it correctly.
You got it. You got it. So this started, and I appreciate that Zara and Ariel are here too, because After in Atlantia, we have an event every December called Unevent, which is basically where all the officers talk about whatever rule changes or how the year went. And so after the equestrian Marshal meeting at Unevent in December, when Zara said that she was going to be running equestrian at Coronation, it was like in one of like our group chats, it was like, well, why don't we do like a pas de deux? Because again, like there has been drill teams like you've done before, but I haven't seen it in the SCA in about 4 or 5 years, and it was at WoW with Roar of the Wings, which I generally don't go to, and I have a lot of drill team experience, so I'm like, okay, it can be really hard to get a whole drill together, but like, what if we just did 2 people? And so we thought that Coronation would be a good event to do it at because there are more people that tend to go to it, and so it was a chance to kind of showcase the equestrians. And because in Atlantia, you have like the rider authorization as well as the games authorization, and so this would allow like people who just have a rider authorization to do something, right? Because again, a lot of times we get stuck in the challenge course and then a game in the afternoon, and so people that just ride don't always have opportunities to compete in something. But we divvied it up between basically the goal was like riding in a pair along with music, and again, Zara was the EQMIC for this, but we had some pointy hats that judged it, and you had to do, if you like your music and your outfit and your horse's outfit all matched in time period, you got like extra points, and like documentation for the music got you extra points, and documentation for your outfit and your horse's outfit got you extra points. And it was really like, but the majority of the points was in the riding and how you and your partner rode together, as well as like how interesting was it for people to watch, like how interesting was the pattern, sort of thing.
So I'll interject that we had all of the scoring made up ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that people could plan ahead and incorporate, okay, I can't sew, I suck at it, so does my partner. Like, we understand that these, whatever, I think it was 5 points, like, we're not going to get much for that. Or, let's plan, okay, I have a white tunic, you have a white tunic, let's match that way. And, we're not so worried so much about the documentation part of it. So that way people could kind of plan where their strong points were, what they wanted to focus on, as well as helping them figure out how to. We also included with the scoring some helpful hints of things that are considered more difficult, which might help you want to incorporate that or something like that into your pattern.
Yeah,
I
and
can
then,
copy and paste that. Sorry, I'm interrupting real quick. I think you emailed it to me, or could you just is that the score sheet?
Yeah, if you scroll down on that document, after the score sheet, the score page, it shows like the breakdown of the points.
Yeah,
and
I can't do this, or maybe not, but could you upload that to the SCA Equestrian Facebook page so everybody can use it?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to, but I think it might be. I saw it when it came across for your event in March or whenever that was. But I think it might be something nice to share with anybody who would like to do something, to have a guide to go.
And my idea of getting multiple pointy hats to score it was just simply to get a more roundabout number. I just basically took the average, or whoever got the most points total. I mean, same concept, but because sometimes when you have one person judging, they're like, oh, that one's pretty, I'm going to give it to that one. So depending on who you have judging, that I felt that way it kind of evened out.
How many did you have?
I had 4 people, but I opened it up to anyone with a pointy hat, basically, and I ended up getting 4.
Awesome.
But it could have been 2, it could have been 10. I had enough score sheets.
Yeah, and Zara and I did like a little webinar, I guess in the middle of January at the beginning of February, something like that.
Yeah,
So that
somewhere
way,
around
like,
there.
if people had questions, they could ask us about it. And again, just kind of like, you know, how to plan to ride with a partner when you like maybe don't have your horses at the same place, and like how to kind of think about how to go about it. But it sounded like everyone had a good time, you know.
It sounded what I've seen from the Facebook, everybody was like happy to see it. And you did run it as a competition, not so what I did was just basically have a colorful entrance, like wasn't really a cavalry drill, and because yeah, we had 6 riders with banners. I just was like and wanted to do more than just the royals riding into court and dismounting. I thought for all the time, you know, we need to have, and it was 3 minutes on a song that was not medieval, but I thought it looked good. And it was just,
like I will say the same Marshall group chat talked about your video being like, that was so cool.
And basically, and that was one of the things for me, what I wanted to do for my area or kingdom, really to have a little bit more fun and to do things that is great for the audience to watch.
Right. And that was the feedback that I heard, is that the audience really enjoyed watching it. I think the key to keeping the audience engaged, though, is having the riders ready so that they can go back to back with minimal time in between, because which I think we did fairly well. I mean, it took some setup getting from one music to the next, but
like my partner and I were ready on time. Just
well, and you killed it, so there you go.
Awesome. And thanks for sharing that. Oh, Nova, did you have a question? I saw your light coming on.
Oh my God, I'm off mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, you're totally fine. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
No, as long as I've taken the token, I will then add that I was on the sidelines watching the pas de deux. One of the things I wish we had done was have something for spectators and wander through. The phrase that just kept getting repeated on the sidelines as new people would roll in and somebody would explain, it's like they're doing ice dancing with horses. I think we could have done a better explanation than that.
I mean, I refer to it as basically horse dancing, but
yeah, it's 2 at a time. Yeah. So I thought this out because it was just mentioned. Feedback for anybody. Did you ever feel like our audience wants to have more feedback or more explanation on what we do?
I would just love to get more audience. I would like to start there.
Do you think we could increase the audience if we have that equestrian schedule out at 12 and explanations on what we do? Did you? So I never really thought about it. Did anybody really hear? I mean, I love the feedback right now. I wish I had an explanation or somebody to explain it to us.
I've had that at horse shows. People wanting an explanation of what's going on. I think, but the concept, yes, I think even if I haven't heard myself people say that, I think that if we had basically a sideline herald kind of heralding what's going on, I think that would definitely be helpful, because I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way watching. If you don't know anything about heavy, you go, yep, people are hitting each other with sticks, whatever that means. And you go, that's boring, and walk on. But when someone's sitting there explaining to you what's going on, it tends to make it come alive more.
Because I normally try to have this at a joust. If I'm not jousting but judging, I explain 3 points, 1, no points, or whatever it is, out of gate, whatever. The difficulty would be to find a herald who would know enough or willing to learn all of that and can talk and entertain or explain without needing to have it all the time explained to that person, if that makes sense.
So during the pas de deux, I was staying on the sideline because I wasn't judging. I was just running it. I was staying on the sideline and I was commentating on, but my comments were more to try and help the judges. Like, that was a really good movement, or that was a difficult movement, or they're out of sync, or, you know, I was trying to add commentary to help the judges. Part of the problem was that my judges were very spread apart. They weren't all sitting together. But so that would be something I'd like to fix in the future. But what we're talking about is someone else going kind of beyond that and discussing, oh, now they're cantering and you know, that's a faster movement, and kind of explaining more. I was trying to help with the scoring, but I think
and
having someone else for the general audience.
Yeah, and like the feedback I heard from some audience members was like being near you, like the videographer and like another person were near you, and they're like, yes, that was perfect. Loved being near Zara to hear like the input on like what's difficult, what's easy, because like right, a lot of horse people don't, or non-horse people don't know.
Okay.
And so I kind of also wonder if like having, because like for example, I know with the challenge courses, I try to go quickly and then just get off my horse, so I can like help be ground crew and such. And so I wonder if it'd be worthwhile to have basically someone assigned to be like, okay, you know, you'll be the commentator for the first half, and then for the second half, there'll be this other person. You kind of like plan your rides based on, you know, that on when that's happening.
That would work.
And so I am good with herding cats. I'm not good being a herald because I can't project. I squeak. I have no voice, and I tried it many times to do that from the diaphragm. It's not one of the skills I have. And with my German accent,
I get that.
I would be screaming at them and they would leave. But that would be something really, and we maybe could delegate it. There's always somebody who's able to talk louder or could do something. I never really thought about it.
Jeannie's saying that she'd be happy to help narrate between rides too. So that also, she can be loud. I've witnessed this.
Cool. Okay, so pas de deux, with pas de deux, it's not the same, but we also have riding in front of the prince. We have now riding before the sultan, and for what, and I only seen it at Golf Wars, brand new for me. And Lisa and we kind of talked about, I think that we could make this really nice and fancy into something for the audience as well. So I would need to learn more about it because I just got that introduction and I didn't have the horse and the riding. And I just basically participated from the ground at that time. But I think those would be 3 nice things we could do. I wanted to look at more the carousel ride, and I don't remember. I think the one we had at 50 year, it was also more for a demo or entertainment, not a competition.
Yeah, so the one at 50 year was put together as, I think it was kind of part of Doe's ceremony, I think was part of the purpose for her elevation. I didn't participate. I watched some of the practices, but the advantage of the carousel at 50 year was that you're there for a week and you're all practicing together for that week.
Yeah.
So that was one of the advantages there, and also how they got so many people to participate in it. But it's basically a big drill team. That's kind of how I see it.
I learned drill when I started jousting outside of the SCA because they all had the drills from riding in. We all needed to ride in with drills and then get our spots for the joust. but and again, this is what I also would like to add for me on my side, to do something entertaining, not only competition, to have some fun for people to watch. And so the drills, the pas de deux, or drills or carousel, as there's more period. I just did the banner ride, and that was like we could not practice together. I practiced with some people to desensitize the horses and riding with banner, but we actually did not practice together until that Saturday morning. And for that, I thought they were really synchronized. I was amazed. I worked primarily with people to desensitize with banner riding one-handed, because most of them are dressage riders, and one-handed was new to the horse and to them to do the bridle hand, basically, while they couldn't quickly grab the rein because I was holding on to a banner. So that's more what I did, but individually, not as a group. So I totally get that challenge of getting everybody together.
Yep.
So are there any ideas we could do within drills or carousels or anything like that without the need of practicing as a group?
I've researched the period carousels that they did in France, and some of those were basically more of a challenge. A lot of them were more like a challenge course. And you can head them. We have done it in the past here where we set up 2 courses and have the riders come in their mirror images, and they ride in sync to that course. And it's good for the people to watch that. And we've also had a commentator for the people watching, so that somebody is talking about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that goes over really well.
So when you say it was it like a head-to-head course, so you had both sides the same obstacles, or what did you mean?
Both sides were the same obstacles. So you have, what we had there was 4 heads, turn out, 2 sets of rings, turn out, and then we did the at that time we were doing the horseshoes from horseback, which is a pipe. You take a garden hose and make it into a ring about that big, and you try to drop it as you go by over a cone, and measure how close you get to the cone to see. It's basically how to play horseshoes from horseback. But basically you can set up just a standard course of different obstacles, and it's just mirror images of it, and they play it head to head.
Okay. So I'm familiar with head and head, but I never thought to make this maybe as a introduction, like a carousel, show them what we have, basically.
Yep.
I like that. Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
So in that case, you were trying to get both riders to basically be doing it the same thing at the same time, correct? You weren't necessarily trying to get faster. You were trying to make certain that both of them were hitting the rings at more or less the same time. Both were hitting the heads. Am I correct in that?
Correct. And then when we did that as a demonstration, so everybody got to practice the course. And then when we did it as an actual competition, then they were going as fast as they could to get through the course. And the first one with the least amount of faults won.
Okay.
So you could do it we did it as a demo and as a competition, both.
Cool. And you basically don't need to reset the course twice.
Right.
So what type of event were you doing that at? Was that like a day trip or a weekend event?
It was a weekend event. More time in the saddle is good.
So I know some of our challenges up in Atlanta is that we have a wide variety of riding abilities. So like when we talk about carousel and stuff, that's definitely come up of how to manage different riding abilities. basically. I mean, obviously you can modify some stuff, but there's only so much modification you can do before it's not the most interesting to watch anymore. So it's like, would you have input on how to like keep it interesting, even if you can't be going fast or doing a lot of trot or something?
So what would prevent you from trying to match them up by riding ability? So if you've got 2 people or 3 people or 4 people who are basically fairly beginner riders, and walking is the speed at which they're going to do this, that you start with them, two people who are fairly beginner riders riding against each other, and you may have to have a bye where somebody goes twice, but trying to match them up by ability, and you're only using the 3 of they can ride at a walk, they can trot, or they can canter, and trying to match them up.
We're not talking about a head-to-head. I'm talking about going back to doing a display.
Okay.
Or a demo, right? Where Geese is saying, like, okay, she had X number of people, they couldn't do it until they couldn't ride together till Saturday morning, right? And kind of how to navigate that. You don't always know who's going to show up, because people always say they're going to show up and then they don't, or you don't. That someone shows up and you're like, oh, I didn't know they're coming, and kind of can make it interesting to plan.
So for me, I put a post out early and collected the people. I had other people who showed interest, but from that area, I authorized a lot of those riders. I know all of them because I primarily been doing all the equestrian stuff around Pittsburgh area for the last 8 years or so. So my fortune really was I knew their horses, I knew their riding abilities. And the ones I knew they could not trot comfortably for 3 minutes, they were not part of it, or couldn't sit freely in a saddle and holding a banner. Same with the horses. I knew they cannot be neck reined or bridle. That's where I went and checked out, could they do it or not? And like my spotted draft, I needed to pull her out because she did not work in the bridle hand. She just wanted to go and run and have fun at the end and play with the other horses in the arena. So she just left. So there was all the stuff I had questions. I checked it out prior to it. That was the fortune I had by knowing the horses and the people. Otherwise, so for me, what I'm doing for June, I have no idea, because hopefully I get Atlanteans to show up for the June 10th, and I get Middle Kingdom show up for the June 10th. And then Ethelmark. So I hope I get a different group together. I have no clue who's coming or not. I'm planning something with basic riding everybody can do.
If you don't know, pardon me, if you don't know who's going to show up and you've got a wide variety of riding skills, if you're doing this kind of as a demonstration or to show stuff to the general public, what would prevent you from doing okay, I've got a list of 10 things that we want done, and the riders decide amongst themselves who's going to do what. So somebody who's very, very new at riding may go, okay, this is something that I'm able to do. I can't do X because X is beyond my skill. But if you're just doing this as a demonstration, you're doing it much like passing the shuttle I talked about earlier, where the first person does whatever it is they're going to do. They come across a given line, then the next person rides out and does whatever they're going to do. And when they come back, so you only have one rider on the field, but you have them try to choose an element based on their skill level.
I think that comes down to time management of the event, though. Because if you don't have an hour for riders in the schedule to get together and discuss it, that just adds a challenge.
Well, it also depends on what the focus of the event. If you're doing an event specifically for show, for the populace, quite a number of years ago, we did the Clark County Fair here 2 years in a row. And what we found works really well if you're doing a show is you have to have a good commentator that is telling the people what's going on, why this person is going at a walk, why this person is trotting, why this person is cantering, why they miss this, and so on. And that person makes it entertaining for the people watching. Because I don't care what you have going on, if it's just somebody out riding, unless you know what the rules are, it does get boring after a while. You have to have somebody focusing the people to understand what's going on. So having a commentator, even if you just have a tournament, is real important. At our Kingdom Champions, we have a herald that is actually heralding the each one, and they're usually a knowledgeable equestrian also that can talk about what's going on.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. And I think we say it already, a sideline herald, it would be really absolutely awesome.
Yeah. At the total aside, going back to Ride Before a Prince, Gisa, do you have videos of people doing it well that can be used as a resource for people to prepare for an event?
I do, but because I did a lot of them since pandemic via Zoom, and I actually been asked to reopen some of those things again because people would like to continue nowadays. So it's none of them are with me writing because I don't know how to do the technology stuff, or have somebody to video me. The stuff I tried, you can't see me, I'm this big, especially when I'm riding away from the camera. So I'm not the IT person, and I would need, so Jennifer has some stuff, Bridget has some stuff on SCA page, Facebook page, or YouTube. It's the links are for the YouTube, especially some of the more difficult maneuvers. But I've thought actually when I come back to Germany to offer again to do riding in front of the prince and maybe before the Sultan, do videos to talk about the documentation and what is all out there, and then send in your video. Let's go and talk about what we see and how to put patterns together. If that's of interest, I love to do it. In the one barn where I just did the couple weekends ago, that event, most of them are dressage people. They really love that medieval stuff I brought in. So they asked me to do lessons up there. So I might be able then to record it if that's okay with them. But definitely want to waking up that again. My horses, my Andalusian is too young. My Percheron, Daisy, is too much arthritis, and with her cushions no longer the dressage as she used to be pre-pandemic. So I currently don't have a good horse for me to do it as of right now. But I would love to continue with that if that's of interest.
Yeah, like it would be of interest. It's something that we've talked about trying to do more of in Atlantia, but we've also realized that basically none of us in Atlantia feel confident.
Oh, come on, you can't forget everything I taught you guys.
You'd be surprised.
I know it was all pre-pandemic. But yes, we definitely, and now we have Zoom, so we can talk about that and making different, just really talking about how to do the patterns or whatever you need. Whatever is the question you can read on your own. But I realized putting patterns together is one of the challenge. And then the judging thing, I've seen horrible judging, or I shouldn't say horrible, very individualized judging, not based on how it was meant to be. And for me, in front of the prince is more than just doing the patterns, is the harmony between the rider and the horse. And a lot of times that just was left out.
So would it be less intimidating for us in Atlantia maybe if we, I mean, again, I'm kind of going back to dressage here, but if we had like, you know, a first, second, and third level test that we put together with the patterns, we put that out ahead of time before the event, and then people can choose if they want to do the easy, medium, or hard one before the event, and then that way it's less intimidating, have to go, oh God, I have to come up with this pattern and write it out for the
Oh.
judge. And
You making it up already? You presenting them with patterns?
well, that's what I'm
Yeah.
I'm asking the group.
Okay.
Yeah, show kind of like dressage tests where you have the level 1, level 2, whatever dressage tests already ahead of time. That way people can practice it. They don't have to. I mean, I know for me that's the intimidating factor, going, oh God, I don't know all these patterns. I don't know what to do.
So for me, if I wanted to go and compete in whenever in that, I would start now and have whatever time to get my pattern done, not the weekend before or the day before, but that would be me and my organization need. You can, if you would like to offer that, go for it. For me personally, and I'm not on competitor in the mundane world, what I really liked to make my pattern to the skill of my horse. Like Daisy, each time she has issue, she goes side passes. She does side passes in any direction. She could do it backwards if you wanted her to. That is just her coping skill with stress. She does always beautiful lateral work in any direction, but she doesn't canter well on the left side because of her arthritis and everything else. So, and she doesn't back up straight because she's crooked. So for me, I never put that stuff in that she was not good at, but she really was great with lateral, with the box, making the squares. I could do really nice circles. I could do all the trusways, those, haunches work. All of that was easy for her, and she looked easy doing it in her massive 2,000-pound form she had, but or has. But there would be specific things I would never include because I would fight with her. So for me, having a mandated test like the mundane dressage, I'm not sure if I really would want that for me. But if this helps everybody else to get started, go for it. Or you could have it as an option. You can use A, B, and C, or make up your own.
That's what I was going to add as a caveat. Maybe if they don't want to come up with their own, they can choose from A, B, or C.
Yeah, or just to put sections together, this is like 3 moves, 3 moves, 3 moves. This is an easy transition over, or how to get into a spiral, out of the spiral, or serpentine, or stuff like that.
Yeah, because I also know, again, just going back to the website that Jennifer Jox has put together, it's she lists some of the movements, but again, there's no real input on how to put them together, or again how to,
because you wanted that you do that on your own, but it might be a great thing to have those options, like Norbert just, it's for the ones, you see, putting stuff together for my mind is really easy, so it's not a challenge for me, but for some people it is. Put it together, because then and give them the options to take it apart. And that may be something we could also work on it together, as a group, what works for us. And I need to say, I haven't really done a lot since nobody has done anything really since pandemic. Well, actually, Ethelmark has it as part of their equestrian championship. They have games and riding before the points now.
So the 2 other things, and I know we're getting kind of late here. Something else that kind of came up in the discussion in Atlantia with how to not be so monotonous and having different activities is we don't really have a lot of people who are authorized in jousting or mounted combat, and we were thinking of potentially looking at adding more of those or even archery, like having more of those activities at events, and how mounted combat might be a lower threshold for people to get into than jousting, or just with, like, the armor
I
requirements.
found quest was easier than even mounted combat to get people, and we are working currently on it. And I built some quest, which is absolutely funny, but the dog toys spray painted with a magnet. So my helmet is magnetized. Not everybody's is, but mine is. So I have my quest sitting with magnets. It's absolutely funny because if we ride too much, it just was. But the biggest thing for us was nobody can approach my horse. So we wanted to do it. We were all ready for everything with ground practice, but at the end, and we were really working to do the lateral work, like the Rossfechten, and getting closer to the other horse. His horse would not be able to approach my horse in that lateral, or we had horse issues that the horses did not come close enough. We would need to kick the quest off with a lance. We couldn't get close enough. So that would be definitely something for us, or it is something we are working on, but finding the time. We're living over an hour apart to get together to practice with two horses. So that was and I don't know if any other have maybe issues with that you could not go.
Yeah, so I do think that having some ground clinics to kind of remind people that we can do something else.
So we started on the ground.
Yeah.
But that was something we started because we wanted to demo in my January event or practice. And then again, we were good on ground, but couldn't do it on horseback because of horse issues.
The other thing that I would like to see more of is just, again, more. Since equestrian is part of the SCA, and SCA is a 501c3 educational nonprofit, is seeing more of the education part and more of the historic part being brought into the equestrian side. And some of our games like Daiku and such do have historical background. Obviously jousting again and mounted archery, but again, how to incorporate more of the historic aspects. For example, like I've recently gotten fascinated by the Italian parade costumes that they made for horses. Like the drawings of them are very odd. And like trying to, if people think that would help again bring more of an audience to be like, oh wow, like I know we did some of the costume contests during the pandemic, but kind of bringing back some of that with, yes, there's a historical basis for this, and like, who doesn't love an animal in a costume, frankly?
So it's funny you say this. The first time for me, I'm getting out of my comfort zone and actually do an equestrian class at war practice. And that is not riding in front of the prince or jousting 101 or how to build games. Most of you probably don't know because I kept it really quiet. I did domestication of our feral horse, which mine was not completely wild, based on Rufus. And I made the halters and the hovels and all of that stuff. So within that, I basically going to start to share that within classes. Might not be exactly what you're looking for with the games, but or with other equestrians about history of the game. But I'm starting war practice, which is in May, actually a couple of weeks now, to share horse housekeeping, domestication of a wild horse is just the beginning, and how the different halters work, the rope halters versus the flat holders. And there's not a lot of research out, same with some of the farrier work, what they had, or how did they actually tie them up while they kept them. So I'm starting to do a lot more of that. Based on some of the documentations in a folder. So my young, but she's still really young, my 3-year-old Andalusian, I'm gonna train her based on the old masters, with her training for that. But yeah, so when I do teach for mounted archery, I started to do mounted archery training doing non-equestrian events where I basically just have a barrel with a hobby horse sticking out of it and a blanket over, and I pretend that's my horse, just basically how to desensitize a horse, how to shoot an arrow from horseback. But I always started that class with a history of, because I don't think a lot of people really know the history of the kitty cats, the history of mounted archery and how long it lasted, and the warfare or the lack of, and really more the hunt for the mounted archery. So I do start to include a lot of that stuff when I teach it, but most of the time not doing the equestrian hands-to-hands or hand-on part, because if you're sitting there in armor to get ready of jousting, you don't want to hear about the 15 different types of jousting. Ed, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, one of the things that I have done in the past here and on tier to promote equestrian to the general SCA is what we call, which is a big thing that we need to do all over the place, especially with our insurance going up and everything else, is to get people interested in equestrian is I run children's equestrian games. And basically what I did is I created a whole set of games that were man's size. In other words, they're not, the rings are not way up here, they're at head level. And I built a small quintain, the same thing. And then we would run the children's equestrians with the children on the shoulders of the adults. The adults were the horses. The children got to play all the equestrian games, and we have a I would commentate on how we scored it. We'd score it exactly like we score it for the tournaments, for the quintain, for the rings, for the heads. And it was a huge blast. The kids love it. The adults love it. It basically educates the populace without having to do classes, and it travels easily because we use PVC pipe, and what we used was Christmas tree stands to hold the equipment up. So we could move it into a hall and do it indoors, or we could do it on a regular tournament field. But it's a way to promote equestrian without having horses at the sites.
Yeah. And didn't you have a meeting after the, like, what was it, in March or April about education for the populace? Didn't you have a meeting after we had Zoom meeting?
Yeah, I've had 2 Zoom meetings with it, and I'm now doing classes at every time we do an equestrian event. The marshal in charge has to do a class on how youth can be around horses and how adults can be around horses. We bring the people down, show them the safety procedures, how to approach, how to work with horses, how to be there safe. We run them through, what do you do with the horses walking by you and they don't see you? Basically, I'm really pushing more of our marshals here and on tier to get out there and educate the populace to more mainstream what we're doing.
Do you have any paper, anything that you could share with us about those classes that we maybe could use?
I just put a publication out to our autocrat, to our event steward Facebook group on how to have horses at your event. What do you have to consider? Space, insurance, trailer spaces, so on and so forth. I can send that to you.
I would love that. And are you okay if I share this for everybody else to use?
Sure.
If you send it to my Facebook, PM that instead
think I
of the
can-
chat.
I think I can put it right here on the messenger too.
Yeah, I don't know how to download it from the messenger. I couldn't copy and paste
So-
earlier.
For me, one of the biggest challenges for going to events is the setup. A lot of the site recently that we've been using a lot in Atlanta doesn't have an arena, so I have to set up the arena itself in addition to all the stuff in the arena. So when I host events there, because I'm by myself, I'm loading it all, I'm unloading it all. I mean, I have help when I get there and stuff usually, but I take into account how I set up my challenges also based on the setup. So at the last event, that's part of why I got kind of lazy in my afternoon. You know, we had a challenge course in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we had broom polo because setup for that is easy. It's a ball. It can be a dodgeball, soccer ball, jolly ball without the handle. People bring their own brooms and 4 cones to set up the 2 goals. So I know for me, that's something I take into account for setting up my schedule as well is okay, how much resetting up of the arena between challenges, or reorganizing, I should say, of the arena, or just how much stuff I have to bring in general. I also don't run head to heads very often simply because of numbers and because it's twice the amount of equipment. So I didn't know what other people's what they do or kind of their thoughts on that.
I got a regular trailer, enclosed trailer. That's my equipment trailer. My Jeep pulls that one while my truck pulls the horses. I totally get that. All of my stuff, I was too lazy to load it into my gooseneck in and out constantly. So I literally have an equipment trailer where the entire list, so the riding arena, all my lances, equipment for all the games, and I just made a lot of games, and I started out inexpensive with PVC and upgraded to nice wood ones. So now I have a bunch of stuff, but really I show up with a separate trailer for the equipment because it was so much work to load it, unload, loading it at home, setting it up. Most of the time I have more help on unloading it or taking it apart and they get it to my truck. But then at home I need to re-unload it as well again. And it was just killing me. It was like the 1-day event became a 3 or 4 day event just for packing and unpacking.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
going
just
back,
enough trailer. Sorry,
Yeah.
Michi.
going back to whomever was at the beginning of the night, I'm sorry, I can't remember, who said like they don't know what equipment's showing up. I feel like gamblers' choices make it really easy where, yeah, let's see what shows up. Assign points when you get there.
Yeah, I think Laura mentioned that.
Yeah, and I feel like Zara is also really good at, because she's been running a lot of the equestrian the last couple of years. I've been running events. She's been running equestrian events. It works great. But of incorporating different things that maybe aren't typical equestrian games. That again, like the broom polo, where like that's just the ball and people bring their own brooms. But also, there was an event last year where she did carnival games, so it's like throw the rings on the cones, like stuff that does pack down fairly easy and small. And we found out that none of us had very good aim when trying to knock over a tower of Mountain Dew cans off a platform. I don't think any of us got those points, but.
And it also depends really not just the equipment, the ground crew. And that's something actually I wanted to talk about today as well. When we do sign up or design our games, I've been at games where it was set up that you drop the lance here, you need to pick it back up here, and you need it like twice in the game. So was for the ground crew, a lot of running back and forth. So that was something, and now not everybody has the ability to do that or that skill to do it, but make it ground crew friendly, that people don't have to run back and forth, so Lance stays with Lance, or you carry your sword if you can.
Yeah,
And have something to pick up your own equipment can be part of your challenge course, where you have a weapons rack. And some horses will never get close to the weapons rack, and that's gonna be losing time, or you don't get that weapon, or you need to organize somebody else to give it to you. So that was something I thought, to be mindful with how to design, or when you design your obstacles, that you don't need to have your going for like bringing 3 times the lance or whatever it is.
Master Toggrel redesigned our flag race up here by putting out 4 hay bales in a square. And our flags had basically they were a sharpened dowel. So all the flags were in a bale. And what you did for the flag race, which made it real easy, is you started at one end, you grabbed the flag, you moved it to the next bale, picked that flag up, move it to the next bale, all the way around the square. And when the last flag went in, your time stopped. The nice thing about that is no ground crew other than to pick up a drop flag.
So
Exactly.
one of the ways to deal with that is, and we just did something like that this weekend, where you start with the flag in a bale or a cup, however you've got it set up. You pick the flag up, you go to the far end of the arena around some sort of turning pole, and you come back and you put it right back where you got it. And if you put that right at the start, then you've got whoever happens to be ground crew, if they're picking everything up right at the beginning and they're going to the far end to do something, if it's not something they're throwing, they come back and they deposit it more or less where they picked it up. And then so you can have one ground crew on the end can police all of that, because they're picking it up and dropping it back off in the same location.
Yeah.
Same thing with the javelin. You can have your bales stacked up with your target on it, have the javelin in that bale, ride by, pick it up, ride down, do a circle, come back, throw the javelin. It's at the same location. So designing your course so that it makes it easy on your ground crew is real important.
Especially if you only have few ground crew, and yeah, and where you drop off the wings or anything else for that. So you maybe can go and reset the heads while you're putting the wings back on. So it's like one time to go for the ground crew down to reset both games, instead of going from one end to the other end to reset anything for the next rider.
And kind of to add a tangent to that, I know not every kingdom has MOLs, but keeping your scoring simplified too. I've worked with some EQMICs that their scoring is, I mean, it takes them 30 minutes or longer just to describe the course and the scoring and answering questions, because it's just so effing complicated. So I would add also, I mean, in my opinion, explaining the course should take 5 minutes.
Do we want to talk a little bit, because that was one of my points for today. I'm not sure if we need it in here to share a little bit about how to score, what to look out for when you do set up your score sheet.
So I've done scoring where everything is very, very tight, where you have, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 points with a multiplier for gate, which just encourages people to go faster. I've also seen, and I kind of like this one, that I stole the idea from Sir Sato, which is everything you tell them, riders like, what are things worth? And you're like, everything on the course is worth points. You don't know what the points are, so the rider doesn't really get to game the system and go, well, this doesn't really amount to much, so I'm going to skip this because I suck at it anyways. the last one I did, because it was a head-to-head, and there were some rings, there were some reeds thrown in there if you got to draw the card for the reeds. I basically just did a 3, 5, 7, 10. And it was just, I looked at it when they rode down, if it looked like they got, if they got the small targets on the reeds, you'd give them more points, and you just kind of estimated it. And it was just 3, 5, 7, and 10. If they got all of them, you gave them a 10. And it wasn't like you had to sit there and calculate everything out really closely. You're just kind of eyeballing it as they run through. That doesn't necessarily give you an exact score, but then if you're doing a head-to-head, use the first person to cross the line as a tiebreaker, then you can get close enough. And if it's not exacting, but you're not out there with a calculator trying to calculate each little element. You're just kind of eyeballing it and saying they made an attempt, they didn't get it. Well, I'll give them 3 points because they made the attempt. They made the attempt, and they, like if you had a keyhole, or say they had to come in and side pass something, and they got across, they straddled it, and they got about halfway across, or they got across, if they got halfway across, you give them 5 points. If they got across it, but the horse, stepped out of the pattern once or twice, you gave them 7. So you didn't have to sit and count, how many steps did they take outside of the if you've got a flower box that they've got to come in and side pass around the flower box, you don't have to count how many times was their hoof outside of the flower box. You're just looking at it and saying they did the pattern, they got a couple of hooves out, you take a few points off and go. That requires a little more judgment and a little less hard numbers.
So I'm not a fan of the gate multiplier, simply for the fact that sometimes you can't do every single element at said gate, or sometimes things are set up too tightly. So what I like to do for a lot of my challenges to encourage people to go faster is what I do is I time you. And then you take your time and you minus your points, time in seconds minus your points. And it's kind of like golf. You want the lowest score.
I've done that. I've also used a gate multiplier per element. So you could go out there and you could say, okay, this is, say you're pig sticking, and I could do a pig sticking and a canter. Then you get the points for cantering and doing a pig stick. But if you come up to something else that is that you're not so good at and you're going to slow down, well, then you do something at a trot. I did one where I had 2 rings set up that overlapped each other. It was a Venn diagram. And I decided on that particular one that these 2 rings were 2 fanatical guards, and you had to get both rings. You could get it in 1 pass, you could get it in 3 passes. Your score was 5 minus the number of passes you took to get the ring, and there was a gate multiplier. And so we had people that trotted, got 1 ring, turned around, came back the second pass, missed the second ring, and walked on the 3rd ring, and I gave them a score of basically 3 passes at a walk. So it was the lowest gate you used to complete it, but you got to decide how fast you wanted to try the first time, second time, and so that basically, it encouraged you to go faster. But if you finally completed it at a slow speed, you got the penalty of doing it at a slow speed. And I used time it was your time minus the number of points you got. So it encouraged you to go fast, but also you got penalized if you went faster than you could accomplish an element at. But that requires more math when you're out there doing it.
And you need to be very careful that you need to have the experienced people and enough people really to say that was canter, that was walk. I used to do the gate multiplier pretty much as you just mentioned. And then it was like, was it in a walk or was it in a trot? Did they fell out of the gate because they started in a canter and then finished in a trot? Or did they finish it? Because sometimes games can go really fast. And if you don't have for every game and you have the people experience to write this down or remember it until it's on paper and you can do the calculations, I had a lot of can't remember situations, and then I felt I might not be fair to everybody because it got really fast and overwhelming. So I do it timed. My events nowadays, I have like a time limit, and the time limit is based, I normally write it through and then I add couple seconds. So if I make it at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, you get a 3-minute time limit for it. If you need to do all obstacles, or depending on how I do it, but normally that you need to ride, at least attempt all of it before you can repeat some of those. So you can't just go through the waterbed because every hoof is 5 points or whatever if you step on the waterbed. So I make it, you need to do all obstacles. If you have time left, continue with something else until you run out of time. That's for me. If you can ride fast, then you can speed it up, but I don't need to watch the gate or the multiplier for that. And I just basically collect the points of the obstacles. And for me, most of my points, I make it very easy. They're all 5 points or 3 points, something easy to multiply or to add together. So it's not, because I normally don't have MOLs. I've somebody delegated to write it down and somebody to take the time, because if you time it and you're writing down the score, sometimes you forget maybe the time or whatever. So I'm trying to have different people for that.
Yeah.
So some old school ways of doing it that we used to do a long time ago is we'd run each element separately and score it separately. So in other words, you would have, everybody would run the rings. That would be scored. Everybody would be placed in that first, second, third, so on. And then we do the heads course, score it all the way through. And then any other elements we'd have, we would have those. And at the end of the day, then it was a little more bookkeeping, but the overall winner was who placed most consecutive in each one of the elements. In other words, if you had a first place, second place, second place, second place, you would probably win overall. But we also gave small prizes for each one of the elements. So at the end of the day, if we had 5 elements or 8 elements, you had 9 winners. Everybody, just about everybody then went away with some sort of I accomplished something today.
One of the advantages to doing it that way is that you keep the riders more engaged, because instead of you go out, you get there early and you ride and then you're done and you can sit and watch everybody, or you show up late and you don't see everything else. But if you're there, everybody runs the rings once, then you're there the whole time. There's more standing around potentially, but you're also occupied for short periods during that time when everybody's sitting there.
Correct. The other thing too that helps is pre-planning, and I've got to say that Amis and them that run the M Prize of the Black Lion do terrific. This is the score sheet for M Prize of the Black Lion. It's not coming through.
We can't see that.
Nope.
No.
But it has all the scores on it, and all you got to do is basically fill in the box. The scorers just fills in the boxes, and then each rider can sit down later and they score and hand it back in, so that the riders know what they did and how well they did.
Yeah, I generally have spreadsheets for the MOL or whoever is collecting it. I do Excel spreadsheets and just handing it out. So people could see for what obstacles, how many points, as well as I post that at the end, what is then to say you're the winner because of those are the points.
Yeah, so the other thing to keep in mind as we talk about points, talking about timing, and isn't necessarily, the fastest person will win or what have you, is with Gambler's Choices, part of why I like them is because they do let people pick what they're good at. And again, it's like, if you happen to go fast, but maybe like sometimes we have stuff that you have to be slower in, like backup L's are worth more points because they take more time than running through the heads, right? And so we kind of can weight points also based on how much time they take, even if you don't have to be the fastest rider necessarily to score well with them, if that makes sense. And what my biggest thing to remind everyone is that with the Gambler's Choice, you should not have enough time to do everything. It should be an actual choice. because I've had people be like, what, my time's up, but I didn't do everything. And I'm like, yeah, you're correct. Like, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, you have to make a choice about how you're riding and ride to your strengths and how much time you're going to spend on what.
Are you allowed to do the same obstacle more than once?
We have had it that you can do something twice, but you must do something else in between.
Okay.
So, yes, we've done that. When I set up the Gambler's Choice, I don't do that simply because it's really hard on the ground crew to try and get the head set up. Again, if they do the heads, go to the tarp, come back to the heads, sometimes there's just not enough time. And I just don't think it's fair on the ground crew to do that. So I try to set up my time and the number of elements based on only being able to do things once.
So I just did I call it a poker tournament where I was doing it as a head-to-head, and I gave everybody, to make it a little more on par, everybody had the same 3 elements. We were playing 5-card draw. And so you had the same 3 elements, and I set it up to use 1 quintain lance. You made a pass going down at the rings. You came back and tried to stick a pig, and at the end, we did what's called we call it pony pole dancing. It's a groche pole. You have a 12-inch flower circle, and you put the end of the lance in that circle. You circle in that circle in the ground. You circle around that circle with your lance on one direction. You reverse and make another circle the other direction. You dropped your lance where you picked it up, which is where you started. But those were the 3 that everybody had. Then we had a deck of cards. With help from a friend, I made a deck of cards with medieval illuminations. You would draw 2 elements. And if you didn't like one or both of those elements, you could drop it, you could discard it and draw a replacement, but then that was your hand. I had to have a lot of equipment set up out on the field. I had about 19 different elements out there, but you may take something like one of the ones I had out there was the 2-handed Burhas with a 9-foot spear. You pass it through from one hand to the other back to the first hand. It's a son of a gun to do. I know one rider who can do it consistently, Gwen. But everybody, when they got there, like, oh God, no, that's terrible. So you would discard something, but then you draw a replacement, and you may throw out something. You may look at something and go, yeah, I'm not very good at this, I'm going to discard it, and you draw a replacement, and you may get something that's even harder for you, but that's too bad. That's the luck of the draw. And so every time you ran out there, if you made it through one round, the next time you went out there, your run was going to be different because you're drawing different cards. This case here, I basically just discarded the card and you drew new. If I had a bunch of riders, I would be tempted to stick the card back in the deck, reshuffle it, and it's just like poker. You threw out a 3 and you drew another 3 because, well, that's the way the deck is. There's 4 suits. But in order to give some parity to that, I just made everything worth the same amount of points, and it just sucked. If you picked something like the backing down an L and back and going back across, actually that one I just did it one direction. You pick whichever direction is best for your horse. It's a time suck, and that's just too bad. That's the luck of the draw. It doesn't necessarily have to be fair. The entire course doesn't have to be fair because you have some choice. You can kind of play to your strengths to a point, but you also are only, if you've got something where you don't have to reset a bunch of equipment, at most you have 4 things you would have to reset every time, 2 for each rider. Because if you've got the other 3 that are designed something where it resets itself, then you don't have to don't have to reset the whole course. You've only got a couple of things. So in this case, I had the spinners. So you hit them, they self-reset because gravity does that for you. With the dog squeak toy as a pig sticking, you hit it and it stays on the ground. So you don't have to reset that. And with the flower circle or keyhole or whatever you want to do, if you're doing that right there at the beginning, it's right there. So if you've got to reset it, the person who's going to be handing lances back and forth can do the resetting if necessary. So that was something we did on that one, and it limited how much resetting you had to do, even though we had a javelin toss, we had a gate, we had a torch that you could throw, we had heads, we had reeds, we had a bridge across the tarp. I'm trying to remember what all we had. So you could make it so that you don't have to do everything. In this case, you just had 5 elements you had to do, 3 were the same.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many different variation, and again, it's just really to keep it simple sometimes, or to keep it manageable for whoever is doing the score sheet and running for the ground crew. So whatever system we're putting in, really, I like with the card drawing, and I think it was war games where you roll the dice, and then you could have a handicap while you needed to ride, which could be whatever, different changes horse, or you ride without stirrups or something like that. That I thought that was kind of neat and challenging as well, because it added a different challenge. You did not know what you were drawing, and what handicap you would get.
So the one comment I make on that with that handicap was that one of the handicaps they had was you had to basically back your horse until they would keep until they rolled the same numbers a second time. The one downside to that particular handicap is that that's a very hard thing for most horses to do for extended period of times. That would have been a better handicap to have you have to ride the challenge element backward until they roll the dice a second time. Because if you've got a course and you're trying to ask your horse to back 30 feet to get to the element, and they're rolling the dice and they're walking 5 or 10 feet to pick the dice up, that's a lot of backing, and the horse can get very frustrated with that very quickly.
Yeah, obviously it should be horse friendly and everything else, and if you would get that you have to ride without stirrups, and that is definitely something you cannot do because you have balance issues or some other difficulties, you can't do it, then you need to get something else. Totally agree with that. It's still, at the end, the goal is to have fun for all of it, for the riders, for the horses, for the audience, and the ground crew as well, or the MOLs and whoever helps us as well. So really not, I know a lot of us really would like to do more or different things, but at the end we really need to make sure, are we safe, and is it fun for all of them, or is it now frustrating, stressful, because we don't like the way it's scored or it's judged, or running back and forth, too exhausting, not nice for my horse. Really, whatever we do, keep all of those points in mind. So it is on like 9 o'clock. If you guys do have pictures of some of the games, some of the thing, or like I normally keep my obstacle course, like the write-up or so, or score sheets, I have stuff. I can go, and maybe I'm not good with a Google Doc, but maybe we can load up something on the SCA equestrian page. I find like this is the most accessible group for everybody if you're not part of it. Instead, every different, I normally try to cross share with the kingdoms I'm group member as well. But if you send it to me, I will go. I'm leaving for Germany in 2 days, but when I come back, I can go and maybe pull things together. And if you have anything else that you think about, best way for me, either you do email, that is gwallenstein@yahoo, or just add it to the Facebook PM normally works for me too. Or if you PM me and need my email, I can give that as well. I just think one document is easier than everybody has it singly somewhere floating in cyberspace.
Thank you, Gisa. This is
sure.
It's been fun. It's like I have ideas. I have ideas now.
Good, awesomeness. And if you ever,
Ditto.
I mean, we always can go and get together and brainstorm and share. That's what this room is all about at the end. The discussions we can have and encourage each other. I believe in not reinventing the wheel if we don't have to. So if you don't mind that your research and hard work is shared and that helps somebody else to pull things together, I'm okay with that, with my stuff to go out. So and use it if that helps you. And I like that idea, Liz, to make patterns, suggestions of patterns they can use. With like 3, 4 patterns back to back, and then they can choose from it. Because I think most writing in front of the print is a minimum of 3 patterns, maximum of 5 minutes. That's normally what I see. But as the event coordinator or the activity coordinator, you can make up your own rules. I've seen a lot of writing in front of the print score sheets modified to what they wanted to have.
So I do shorter time limits. If it's a single activity, I usually give it about 3 minutes. If it's a paired activity or group activity, I'll give it 4 to 5, just simply for attention span.
I agree. I think 3 minutes is, and especially if you have 10 riders.
Yeah. And 3 minutes of one person, if all they're doing is walking around, is like 5 hours. It feels that way. Now, if you have one person trotting or cantering for most of that 3 minutes, it does go by much faster. But I find that
it just appears to be faster. For 3 minutes or 5 minutes, it's still the same time.
Well, right, but I just meant as far as the enjoyability of it for those watching and those scoring it. It's, you know, I've watched some tedious, not Ride Before the Prince, but I've watched some. I've helped score some very tedious things where there was no time limit and the course was set so tight that you could barely trot any of it, and it took everybody 5 or more minutes to complete it. And yeah, I was ready to put my eyeballs out.
Yeah.
3 minutes for a Ride Before a Prince should provide you adequate time to do a number of things. Like 5 minutes seems an awful lot. And you know, whether you're walking it, trotting it, cantering it, 3 minutes is a long time to demonstrate any number of maneuvers. Challenge course wise, again, 3 seems like a reasonable time. I certainly wouldn't go longer than 5. Even if you've only got 4 riders, that's still 20 minutes plus reset time plus getting everybody together. That's at least a half an hour if you're giving them 5 minutes. And you know, part of it is that I'm no longer a beginner rider, but sitting there watching somebody walk a course for 7 or 8 minutes trying to do everything is just brutal. So having that time limit basically means you do as much as you can do until you run out of time.
I also see the time limit also as I want to include beginners and I want them to feel welcome and enjoy their time as well. But at the same time, like, okay, you've got 3 minutes to do it or 5 minutes to do it. Get done what you can. Whatever you didn't get done is whatever you need to work on.
Yeah,
it's a competition. Like, that's just part of the competition.
And if you can either set it up with you do it in this order, or you've got 5 minutes, do it in whatever order suits you. And you know, you do as much as you can do in that time. That gives them some flexibility. You know, if there's not necessarily a set pattern they have to run, then they have to decide, how am I going to do this in the most efficient time that I can get? Does that mean that I make a wide turn here and come back to run through this element because that's what I'm doing, or walk through this element? Or it gives them some flexibility and there's some challenge. The downside to that is that if it's the course is laid out like that, the 6th or 7th or 8th person to run it, if they're sitting there watching it, can kind of learn from everybody else and get a bit of an advantage. You know, so like when I did the poker thing, the trick there was that you didn't know what the pattern was until you got your 2 cards, and then you had to sit there very quickly and decide, well, what are you going to do? You know, once you figured out what the 5 elements were, the 3 were the same. The last 2, you just decided what was in what order to do. you know, and in some cases you needed the lance for the fourth or fifth element. And if you dropped it if you dropped it to draw your sword, well, now you got to ride back to the ground crew to come pick it, to hand it back to you because you dropped it rather than taking it with you, you know, and just doing that as a fourth one. So it forced the riders to do a little thinking as well to try to optimize their run.
Yeah, and that's again, and we can redo this, so we can play with some of those ideas. I think next month I need to double check with Kathleen if she still wants this up for the carriage thing in June, but we can go and do maybe in the winter time brainstorm again for games and scoring, and share what we learned over this year. So it is past 9 o'clock, so I am stopping.